This is the Demystifying Mental Toughness podcast, hosted by David Charlton, and you're listening to this podcast to help you build your own mental toughness, so that you can support other people or your clients better. Either way, you will learn more about developing this plastic personality trait that all but guarantees that you will perform better and lead a more prosperous life. According to Professor Peter Clough and his colleagues, mental toughness is defined as a personality trait which determines in large part how individuals deal with stressors, pressure, and challenge, irrespective of the prevailing situation. So if we think about sport, emotional control is going to be one big factor. A golfer or an athlete who's able to compose themselves under the greatest amount of pressure, perhaps standing over a 5-foot putt to win a club championship or a professional tournament when they know their career rests on it. And today, we're going to look at this in more depth, how you can help yourself remain in control of your emotions, staying present. We look at why it's so important and what happens in the brain when you're unable to, when you have performance anxiety or the yips. And today I'm joined by Alessia, Bruno, Andy Paisley, and firstly, well-respected performance coach, Karl Morris. So today we're going to look at emotional control, which is a huge element of mental toughness and a bit of a challenge that some golfers face from time to time. So starting with that, what do you see are typical challenges golfers do have? If we look at professional golfers to start with on the golf course.
I think first of all, I think it's an area that's so overlooked that there's such a potential opportunity for, I would say, virtually everybody from, early starting in the game to, as you say, right up to playing on PGA Tour or European Tour. And a model I've sort of shared with a lot of people over the years is that every shot has 3 parts to it. There's what you think or what you process before the shot. There's the execution of the shot, and then there's your reaction to whatever the golf ball does. And as I said, virtually nobody looks at the third part. Whenever we watch golf on TV and somebody hits a bad shot, it's the swing that always gets the blame. We'll see Tiger Woods hit or whoever. Tiger Woods hits a ball off to the right, and an expert comes on the the telecast, and somebody said, "Well, what did Tiger do on that one?" And they'll put the swing up there, and they say, "He dropped it on the inside, or he flicked it, he got trapped," or whatever the buzzword is. And I think that's a too simplistic view of it, because he didn't seem to be getting trapped on the inside for the previous 14 holes. Why has he suddenly got trapped on the inside on the 15th tee? But perhaps if we rewound a little bit and saw the fact that maybe Tiger 3-putted the previous green and he was furious about it. He 3-putted from 8 feet on the previous green. He walked to the next tee, maybe didn't go through his normal communication with his caddy. Then, it opens up a different debate that the shot that you actually see that goes offline, can it be traced back to the reaction to a previous shot or a previous putt? And I think that's where, most of us playing golf could dramatically improve if we looked at. It's not so much. I've often said it's not so much the bad shot that's the problem at golf. It's the reaction to the bad shot that's the real issue. Yet ironically, starting from your next game of golf, you could endeavour to be better at that. And I don't see too many downsides to improving the way that you react to what the golf ball does. If getting angry and calling yourself names was a formula for better golf, there'd be more scratch players out there.
No doubt about it. And yeah, you often find as well, if people do make a mistake like that, their instant reaction is to start thinking about the technical aspects and changing things up. Do you find that?
Yeah, absolutely. Because that's what I think we're conditioned to do, aren't we? We've been so conditioned on TV and analysis that bad shot equals swing change equals the swing is at fault for that particular shot. No, it may well be. I'm not so naive as to say we don't need to work on our swings. Of course, if you've got tendencies in your golf swing that are, if you pass 8 to the right or 8 to the left and you've got a club face that's flapping around all over the place, well, you need to do some work on that. But just to isolate always that a bad shot is a result of a swing that's changing, I think misses a big part of the puzzle. But I think probably more importantly, when you're in the middle of the round, middle of a game of golf, with the best of intention, it's tough to change your golf swing. But what you can, I think, in a round of golf get better at is changing your attitude, changing your reactions. So to me, what this is about is about everybody listening to this. If you think of your golf game as it is now, ask yourself the question: are you getting the best out of what you've got? If you didn't improve your golf swing at all, are you getting the best out of it? And if the answer is yes, well, just work on your golf swing. But if the answer is, yeah, I should be scoring much better than this, I do see good capability on the range, well, then perhaps it's time to maybe look at what you do before the shot, what you do after the shot, how you react to things and your general attitude. So I think what it does is just, instead of, Pia Nielsen came out with a great one on the podcast that I did. She said, she feels sorry for the golf swing because it always gets the blame.
Yeah, you're right. That gets criticised an awful lot. There's not many people actually look at how nice the swing is and the nice smooth rhythm to it or anything like that, is there?
But it's almost the easy victim, isn't it? It's the easy scapegoat, really, because you can see it. You can see the club face, you can see the angle of attack, you can see your low. Well, you can't see your low pop, but you can analyze all those things. Where your emotional reactions and the effect of a cortisol spike in your system isn't quite so easy. Man, there's more technology with that now with things like Whoop, but I think up to very recently, it's very difficult to sort of gauge emotional reactions. So we tend to just point at the obvious thing to look at, which is the golf swing. But as I said, anybody listening, please, I'm not saying for 1 minute don't work on your swing. I'm not saying the swing isn't important. I'm not saying mechanics aren't a part of it. They are, definitely. But it's that quest of getting the best out of what you currently have when you play. The art of playing golf as opposed to the science of the golf swing.
And you mentioned a little bit about the aftermath of the shot, which a lot of people don't look at whatsoever. How do you go about training that?
Yeah, I mean, it's very individual, David. I mean, I'm a big fan of a really radical idea, to be honest. The idea that as coaches we should perhaps watch people play golf. This crazy notion that we should actually see people in the environment that we play the game in, because I've long since said this, that we're perhaps the only game in sport, as far as I'm aware of, that most coaches who coach the game don't actually see their students play. They see a snapshot of them as a golfer. They see the golf swing on the range, but get somebody out on a golf course and see how they react to a 3-putt, see how they react when there's out of bounds on the right-hand side and water left and things like that. One of the things that I found really useful as a sort of thing that everybody listening could start to work on straight away is play a round of golf, and this sounds a paradox, really. Don't try and change anything, but just play a round of golf and merely observe your reactions. Just go out there and kind of imagine that you've got a camera following you around, and the camera's actually just going to watch the way you react to all the shots, and that camera is taking some footage that's going to be displayed to people other than yourself. And without getting too deep into the woods on this, the idea that when you observe something, the very act of observing it potentially creates the mechanics for change. So it's a really interesting one to do, because years ago what I used to do is go out on the golf course and I'd film people playing golf, and I'd film the reactions, and then I'd show them on a screen afterwards. This is what you were behaving like on the golf course, and they'd look at it and stroke their chin and say, "Oh yeah, I'm not normally like that," because it's kind of like the reactions that we have on the course become so embedded and so natural and normal that they become habitual patterns, so that we don't even know that we're doing it. And if you said to me, well, why do angry people get angry? My response would be that they get angry because they get angry. They get good at getting angry. They are triggered to respond to in a certain way to what a golf ball does, and you just get very good at the anger response. But that first port of call, and as I say, it sounds a bit of a paradox or a strange one, but just promise yourself that you're going to go out and you're going to note for 18 holes your reactions. How do you react to the chaos that the game throws at? I'll even have players play 18 holes and say, well, what as a follow on from this, what you could do is play 18 holes, and if you feel like you've reacted to the shots on that hole in a beneficial way, give yourself a tick. And if you, on the other hand, if you feel like you've reacted like a child to what's happened out there in a way that's caused a spiral, you've got to put a cross on the scorecard. So you basically got a chance for 18 ticks, only interrupted by crosses. Now, the good thing about that is that you engage people competitive side then, and they don't want to see a card littered with crosses, because basically you've then proven to yourself, excuse the language, you behave like a dick for 18 holes because your reactions have been so poor. So there's kind of lots of subtle ways I've found over the last few years of this idea of emotional control, and you can get very deep into the sort of science of it all, and it all gets very complicated. Or you could use some simple ideas that are very practical in nature that are interesting to explore, and then go out and play a round of golf. And if you can get 18 ticks on your scorecard where you've reacted pretty well to anything that's come along, well, if you come off that round of golf, the very least that is that you've given yourself the best chance. You've done the best you can that day. You've not let poor reactions cause you to drop more and more shots, because even at high handicap level, that's generally the case. We'll play a hole badly, and then we'll play another one badly and another one badly. And people are not generally off 18 handicap because they go and make 18 bogeys. They're generally off 18 handicap because they have a lot of pars, maybe some birdies, but they'll throw 8s and 9s in there, which again, that's got some relevance to the swing. But a lot of it can be because you reacted badly to what happened on the previous hole.
Yeah, I love that notion there when you're talking about observing and then the mental scorecard as well. The ticks and the crosses, because ultimately it's just helping people take a step back, isn't it, and recognise that maybe, right on the 8th hole I did this, and actually this back 9 I'm not going to do that, and they can then adjust and make relevant changes going forward.
What is a simple thing, David? The ticks and the crosses. As I say, it's fun to do it. It's educational for yourself. But also, it's a great mental tool because, without even telling yourself, you're not going to want to see 6 crosses on the trot. You're not going to want to see 6 holes where you've reacted awful to whatever's happened. I think that's the problem in many ways with the mental game and coaching the mental game. Unless you put some ways of kind of observing it, or you put some ways of some kind of statistics on it, it's very difficult to measure. But my experience is when people do this, they can see there's often a correlation between, poor reactions and poor scores. And then on the upside, that they start to see, if everybody listening played 10 rounds and played this game, do some analysis afterwards. Is there a correlation between your reactions and the scores that you do on a given day? And if you can get close to 18 ticks, and your score hasn't improved, well, okay, we've eliminated a variable. We know it's not that. It might well be swing. But just for a period of time, do something a little bit different. Look for the culprit in some different areas other than just whether you've come across it a little bit from the top of the backswing.
The tool that Karl mentioned there about keeping a mental scorecard, I like to use regularly with my clients. And on a previous episode with James Morris, we touched on using process goals in football, which is quite similar, and the ingredients that allow you to perform at your best. And this mental scorecard approach, although not a new one, is linked to this. Process goals, if planned and implemented appropriately, can really give you a much better chance of achieving those outcome goals or positive results. So in golfing terms, a 63 or a 67. In football, maybe a 4 a 4-0 scoreline. In business, a nice tidy profit of £3 million. Now that would be nice, wouldn't it? An example of a mental scorecard I've actually popped into the show notes, but I'm now going to talk you through it. On the golf course, what you could do is you could rate yourself for a certain behaviour for 18 holes. And by doing so, it helps you check in and really dial in into yourself. That's right, you can learn more about yourself in the moment when you are under pressure. So examples of process goals could be having fun, being present-minded, or being sociable. So we'll go with that one, being sociable. Perhaps you're a golfer who, when you play well, you have fun by chatting to your mates, your playing partners, your caddy. It helps keep you relaxed. It helps keep your mind off the score. But then, when you get a good card going, you end up not getting involved because you worry about the impact that it's going to have on your score. You have the idea that you must concentrate, that you must give it your full attention. Because if you're 5 under par, and this could well be the round of your life. So what happens? You then go on to spend too much time overthinking. You start thinking 2 holes, 3 holes ahead. You begin to slow down in your pre-shot routine. And then before you know it, you've thrown in a double bogey or a 7 or an 8. Then bang, that fantastic card is wrecked. The other thing that can happen is when things aren't going so well, you can get embroiled in the time between shots where you're overthinking. You march off by yourself. You don't want to spend time with your playing partners. You want to spend time racking your brains why you hit that last shot to the right or why you hit it fat. So you overthink. And then when you stand over the next shot, you're paralyzed. You're paralyzed by swing thoughts. You have about 10 of them. We've all been there. And this approach of the mental scorecard, using process goals, can really help you not to fall into these traps. And my last piece of advice on this topic is to consider what goes on in your head over shots and between shots. When you're at your best, when you're playing well, consider it, have a think about it. And then what you can do is you can set yourself some process goals on a regular basis that link to this. So for example, I mentioned about being sociable. Perhaps actually over shots, you might choose a small target, or it might be a big target. You might just have one swing thought. Consider it, have a little think about it. I really do encourage you to use process goals and this mental scorecard approach. It really can benefit your game. And you'll find more on this topic in a blog that I've recently written, which is also in the show notes. Now we're going to go on to hear from Alessia Bruno, who talks about fear, which all golfers will know quite well. I suppose what you're talking about there is nearly linking towards perfectionism, and lots of athletes in many sports are always searching for perfection, and that can be because of, like you say, the language of parents or the language of coaches and the way they then go on to interpret different events.
And if you think it's very stressful to be perfect all the time, and it really goes against human nature, and it really gets you very, very anxious. So it's not as effective, the perfectionist approach, as they would think it is.
Yeah, which guides us quite nicely towards the motor skills issues, be it the yips in golf or snooker or other sports there. So, yeah, I see a lot where a putting stroke in golf has to be done perfectly. And that then causes anxiety, bad memories, and in some cases, in fact, in somewhere between 32 to 47% of serious golfers, they are then affected by the yips. Do you want to just talk a little bit about that?
Actually, it's a very important topic, especially in some sports, like baseball, snooker, and golf, as well as others, because they really, the yips are very debilitating. They really affect performance, and they feel they can't control them. And it's a type of performance anxiety. At the end of the day, it's really about feeling worried about your performance, and as we know, anxiety can have different level of intensity, and when it's very intense, can turn into a panic attack, which is all this symptoms, very physical symptoms, like dizziness, sweating, palpitation, shortness of breath, and the yips fit into the anxiety, the performance anxiety problem, because they are like some physical problems, like spasm, that they can have. And think about a golfer. I mean, if you can't control this motor skills, it's not gonna perform well, But then the more he tries to control it, the more rigidity creates into his body, and so it definitely doesn't perform well. And so it becomes like a vicious cycle. The more you get frustrated, the more you try to control, the more you tense up, and the more the task fails, basically. Something I wanted to say, that actually some, as you probably heard as well, some famous athletes who didn't have Sasser, the baseball player, the American baseball player, was really became really famous for the yips problem. And, at that time, probably they weren't the right treatment for him. And he had to end his career prematurely. So let's think, for a professional player, like a professional golf player, this is really debilitating, is a serious problem, and definitely needs to be addressed.
Thing is, as well, it can seep into other parts of their game. If they're a golfer struggling with the yips and the putting, it can then go into their chipping and into other areas and really affect them. And if, let's face it, if they're professional, then they're likely to have financial worries from it, and a whole range of things. They might end up giving up the sport. So it is a huge thing.
Yeah, it's a huge thing, because obviously for them, it's not like somebody has this yips in a different context. It's really about, it's really what you need to control, and the yips don't allow you to control what you need to control. And what you need to control is fundamental in order for you to progress in your career, and have a contract and continue to be a golfer. So there is a lot on stake for them. Yeah, it's really difficult.
And I know when I've personally experienced it a few times, it's like the world stops, or it can feel like things just start happening at about 1,000 miles an hour. Your heart races, you're embarrassed because people are watching you, you're frightened. There's just so much to it.
Yeah, definitely, because in anxiety, like performance anxiety, which then can manifest with these yips, is very common. And if you think about what they go through, athletes, especially professional athletes, they have a lot of stake. They might have, they might train for so many years to go to the Olympic, or they might have a really important competition. They are frequently on newspapers and criticized, and they by fans, but they might not be able to have a new contract, and they feel all the pressure of everyone looking at them, feel judged. So it's quite overwhelming for them.
Are you able to explain what actually happens in the brain when this type of overload by fear occurs?
Yeah, something definitely happens in the brain. It's not out of the blue. Actually, there are very interesting processes when this fight or fly response occur, or freeze response in the worst scenario. We have a very primitive brain when it comes to danger. We are much like our ancestors, in a way, reptilian ancestors. But the difference with the animal kingdom is that after they experience like stressful events and traumas, in their case, maybe more like being eaten by a predator, they seem to, once the threat is over, to shake it off, like the energy. But the difference with us is that we seem to continue to store this energy in our brain. And this is when the symptoms flares up, when we manifest the yips or other blocks or panic attack. There are, just going back to the different parts of the brains that are involved with trauma and intensive fear. As you read about the limbic system, you might have heard of the hippocampus, amygdala, hypothalamus, thalamus, and all these different parts of the brain serves a function. So the thalamus, for instance, is like a central station. It's like a driveway of our brain, and kind of process all the incoming auditory and visual information from the external world. And then we have the cortex, which figures out whether something is threatening or not and needs further attention. We have the amygdala, that is like the fire station that is like, it's really the center of fear and activates the fear response. And then we have the hippocampus, which is like the storage of memories. We also have the locus coeruleus, which is the part that sends all the different responses of fear, like increase in heartbeats, shortening of breath, sweating. And so what happened basically is when there are the amygdala and the prefrontal cortex, which is really important, that turns off the alarming signal. So when we hear something or we see something, like something moving very fast or a very loud noise, we get scared first. And then the prefrontal cortex says, no, you don't need to worry about it. It's just a truck, it's nothing dangerous, it's just somebody who ran really quickly. And the first thing in order to for our species to survive is to get scared. We have to get scared first in order to survive, because we have, as I was saying before, we have this primitive brain, this very old ancient brain, the reptilian brain. And so in order for us to survive, we have to get scared first. And when we get scared, there are other areas like, for instance, the hypothalamus, which has connection with the pituitary gland and release cortisol. The cortisol is the hormone of stress. But then the release of this cortisol doesn't really allow memories to be stored correctly. So they get stored fragmented in a fragmented form. And this is when we have flashback, when we are not over a negative experience, because high level of cortisol, which interferes with the right storage of memories in the hippocampus, results in the person having the memory stored in a somatic form. So the person talks about a negative experience and gets activated. So might feel like very physical symptoms and physical discomfort, as if the situation was still happening, as if was still in the present. So with the technique I use, like brain spotting or EMDR, what we do is to unblock this traumatic material in the brain, process it, and store it in a functional way, so that when we think about it and when we talk about this traumatic experience, we don't get activated and we really feel it belongs to the past. When this doesn't happen, because it's too intense, or it's just one big event that is overwhelming, or there are consecutive smaller events, but it's like constantly getting stress, these memories don't get stored correctly. They are fragmented. And so physically, what happens physically, we go back to the sympathetic nervous system. We have this fight and flight response. But we have a fight and flight response also when the danger, the threat is not present, just because we feel it is still in the present. And just the thought of doing that competition, the thought of doing that hit, the thought of going to the same, football pitch where I had a bad injury, all this kind of stuff gets me activated. Although I might not experience any further negative, experience. But because it's in the present, we get activated all the time just by thinking about it, by talking about it, by reliving the situation with meeting people who belong to that specific trauma, or being in the situation and in the place where we experience the trauma. So like when I saw a motorcyclist, he had a bad fall, and one of his friends as well during a race got really bad injured. it. It was in the clinical room with me, but just the thought of it got him really activated. You could see it was reporting his heart pounding. It was not breathing properly. It was hyperventilating. He felt dizzy, and we were not racing in that moment, but the spirit was in the present. So it's really tricky how our brain works when something is really overwhelming. Yeah, but it needs to be processed so that the past is moved to the past and the athlete is free to perform, being focused and lucid in the present.
I'm pleased to announce a new sponsor for the show, Chimera Sport, who produce a range of sportswear and equipment to enhance performance and recovery, reducing injury occurrences. You'll find on the product section of our website, www.excellence.co.uk/products, access to our own Chimera Sport shop. I've personally tested some of the garments, and you'll find that the infrared sportswear has been clinically tested too, so it's great for fitness enthusiasts and athletes who want to push harder, go further, and recover quicker. Alessia's ideas and thoughts have given me a timely reminder about emotional control in different ways. Now, most people are aware of their thoughts, or at least they're aware that they do think and sometimes overthink at times. Yet often, they just accept that it's a part of them. You'll often hear the words, "I'm an overthinker." And really, when you think about it, that's a very fixed view, or in Carol Dweck's world, a fixed mindset. What they don't realize is that there are ways, and some pretty simple ways, that you can actually help yourself and quieten your mind. If you listen to Karl Morris's full episode, which are again highlighted in the show notes, you'll hear more about this. Anyway, if we also consider the person who experiences extreme performance anxiety and has big physical responses like a panic attack or butterflies, or perhaps they've got to rush to the toilet time and time again, you can actually do something about it. Again, there are many ways that you can quieten your body down. Alessia certainly gives some hope around this, that if you've been through traumatic events or the yips as well, that there are ways to dull such large physical and emotional responses, jerky movements, techniques that many counselling and clinical psychologists use are EMDR, brain spotting, and the flash technique. They're so powerful in this regard. And one thing I have learned when I've seen different clients experience these sort of challenges, and when I have worked with Alessia regarding this, that it is very important to have some patience and give it some time with the practitioner to make these necessary changes. Often these physical, emotional responses are very deep. You may have been conditioned and had them over a number of years. They can be very complex too. So they can take months and months of work and good habits to actually make the change. But the good news is it is possible. So, if you are someone who suffers with the yips, let's consider what difference it would make to your life if you were free from it. Would putting the time and energy into 3 or 4 months of working with someone like Alessia, in the knowledge that your pain and your torture for that matter can be erased or certainly dulled, it certainly beats playing with that problem when you start hating the sport, hating something that you love doing. So, yeah, the message is clear from me there. These things can be changed. An open mind is key to emotional control and better performances. Increased happiness and a big smile on your face too. And now it's Andy Paisley's turn to tell us about some more good habits that you can get into when dealing with pressure and stressful events on the golf course.
Yeah. I think coaching's definitely improved a lot over the last few years. There's a lot more focus on performance coaching. So rather than just coaching a golf swing, you're coaching, whether that's like different skills tests with TrackMan or different putting tests. You're trying to really train real life scenarios rather than just a technical skill. And definitely with some of my elite players, certainly when I'm a say I'm coaching at a tour event now, my coaching is more around performance than technical. You know, you're not going to be able to change too much technically in someone 2 days before a big event, but you can do a lot to their mindset a couple of days before an event. Yeah, that a big part of my coaching now, certainly nearer a competition and with more elite players, is around performance and building a strong mindset with good resilience.
You also mentioned about working harder. That was potentially a trap that you fell into. Do you see that again with other people sometimes? Yeah, it's something I've noticed where people can, the tournament itself, if they could be in a nice sort of relaxed state, that would be the ideal, or at least as relaxed as they're likely to be. But sometimes they end up 24, 48, 72 hours before working harder and harder and like reacting to the situation. So they're in a way that they're burnt out before they even start. Do you see that much?
Yeah, 100%. I think typically with like either younger top amateurs or younger pros that are trying to, on that journey to make it to the top level, you know, I work with quite a few people like that. They've got so much enthusiasm, so much energy and so much desire to be at the top, and, you know, and they've been told they have to work hard, and it's having that education, and it's defining working hard, isn't it? Does working hard mean standing on the range for 8 hours a day, hitting 500 balls? Then no, it's been working hard in a smart way. So, you know, thinking about the energy you need, you know, how much time can I realistically practice and still have energy to compete? So yeah, working hard and working smart are two different things. And I think it's education and time, knowing what works for you, because some players need to hit a lot of balls and they need to feel like they're practicing a lot. And some players need to do the opposite. You know, they need to really lay off it. So I think it's finding your balance of what's the way you can perform at your optimum. I don't think there's a formula that you can come up with and say this. You need to practice for this many hours, that many times a week, and you know, you have to really find that what works for you. But be honest, if it isn't working for you, being able to change it, maybe cut back a little bit. And I think definitely a few players I work with, they maybe feel if they do cut back, they feel guilty and they feel like they're not working hard enough and they're not going to be able to, they don't deserve it, which is a bit of a mental hurdle to get over, I think.
Yeah, I'd agree. Some players would benefit from having another hobby to go alongside their golf in some ways, just so they can switch off from it. But like you say, they can feel guilty, and then that negative self-talk comes in, doesn't it? And they start criticizing themselves, and it just can spiral out of control.
Yeah, guilt practice never works out well, does it?
No.
Like practicing there because you really feel like you should, not because you know that it's the right thing to do. I think everyone's been there. I should be doing this, so I'll do it. But that rarely kind of works out well in my experience.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, like your optimum mindset when you're standing over a golf ball, really, you want to have good posture, so you're feeling 7 foot tall. You want to be like energized and thinking positive things, seeing clear targets.
Yeah.
And it's the exact opposite, isn't it? When you work yourself into the ground and you're feeling guilty for practicing.
Yeah, that worry, that guilt, the negative terms you would kind of put around that. You know, I think your practice should promote all the things that you just said there, Dave. You know, like your practice should be promoting good technique, but it should be promoting confidence, resilience, and just that optimism that you can go and play well. And it can't just be, you know, if I get my golf swing or my putting stroke technique to a certain point, then it can never let me down. I think that used to be, you know, maybe 10, 20 years ago, if you worked hard enough and you hit enough balls, you would have a swing that could do the right thing all the time. But yeah, I think if you're practicing with good attitude and, you know, it's promoting the right mindset every time you practice, I think that's where the most effective practices come from.
Definitely, no, I totally agree. Yeah, one of the questions I try to ask, like all of the guys I work with, is like, yeah, when you're practicing, does it make you feel confident? And if it doesn't, then potentially, you know, you need to look and mix a few things up and change things.
Yeah.
So yeah, thinking about again as a coach and like some of the players you work with, certainly the professional level, you've worked with some winners and you've guys who've had bad experiences where they've lost their card and things like that. Do you want to talk about some of those stressful situations they found themselves in and how they coped with it?
Yeah, I guess I've had it both ways. I think when you think of stress and pressure, there's different forms of stress and pressure. You've got the pressure of maybe winning a tour event or winning a national event, and that's kind of good pressure. It's the pressure that every athlete wants to feel. The chance to win and be successful. And then you've got the pressure, the negative pressure of maintaining your card, the negative pressure of making a cut, the negative pressure of just enough money to make a living. There's so many stressful situations, and I work with like challenge tour and main tour players that have lost their cards, and guys that have kind of been on the bubble and then made their cards, and it's a real roller coaster. I remember Justin Walters. I work with Justin Walters. He's a South African guy on the European tour, and he had a really difficult year last year. He lost his father. He got injured. Which meant he missed a lot of the big tournaments, and with about 4 events to go, he was about 150th on the rankings, and he needed to make more money in the last 4 events than he had done all year, and the way he responded was amazing. He kind of all of a sudden he was more open to things, and we had some good chats. I'm just one of his coaches. He has a good team, and he basically finished. He bogeyed the last hole in Portugal to not get in a playoff. He would have got in a playoff if he parred the last. He finished, I think, joint tied third and kept his card. And so that was an amazing experience. Like from all the highs and lows, he came out and there was a real high. And then, there's guys that have, like my brother, for instance, Chris Paisley's. I've been with him from missing his tour card to, like, I remember one year he held a 20-footer in Hong Kong on the last green to keep his card. If he missed that 20-footer, he would have lost his card. And
so how did he stay calm and, in the moment for that particular putt? Any ideas?
Well, what I said before, you remember him telling me, he said what he always says over he putt. He says, aim perfect and repeat your rhythm. He didn't say this is to keep your card. He didn't say, we have this kind of little self-talk thing that we do as he's kind of going through. So he does his practice strokes, and as he puts the putter behind the ball, and the last thing he says to him, he says is aim perfect and repeat your rhythm. And because that's what he thinks and does all the time in his training, that was obviously a much more stressful putt, but he went through the exact same process, and he made that one. But I think also there's lots of experiences where he's missed cuts and lost his card and had terrible times and learned from that. And I think it's not like it wasn't those magic words that made him hold that putt. He's kind of learned to be resilient from. He's had that many setbacks and failures, and I guess that's probably the biggest thing with the most successful players I work with. When they go through a difficult time or just add one difficult experience, they generally come out the other side better and stronger. With players that maybe you don't see again, they'll have those difficult times and they don't respond maybe in the right way. They try too hard, they don't try hard enough, and they don't learn from it. But the successful guys kind of learn from their mistakes, and they're definitely better off it. Chris has had some really difficult times in his career where he struggled with his game, but every time he comes through them, he's comes out stronger and better the other end. So I think being a coach, you've got to kind of look at those good situations and the bad situations, and kind of always look to what can you learn from it. So that's the conversation I have with all my players. That bad experience that you've just had, what we're going to learn from that, and how we're going to use it to get better. And again, the good situation, what things there did you do well that we can learn to do more often? So everything that happens, you can take something from it and learn from it. I think that's the key takeaway there.
Andy covered an awful lot there in his short bite of mental toughness, so I don't want to waffle on for too long. But what I'd like you to think about is this thing about learning from experiences, and learning from this podcast episode as well. So we've touched on process goals earlier. Are you someone who sets process goals? Hopefully you're now armed with some more support and some advice and understand the concept better. But process goals can actually be used also in practice and when you're training. And if you're an athlete, you're a golfer who's struggling or isn't getting the results that you think you deserve, I'd encourage you to think about this. So what you might want to do is consider the fun factor. How much fun have you actually had in practice, in training in the last month? And consider on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being absolutely no fun at all, 10 that you've had a blast. Think about that and make a little note down about it. Now, we know in sport that practice and training can get repetitive. And if you are struggling for form, you may not actually be giving yourself the confidence from your training that actually you're capable of. You may need to experiment, to be creative, to have some fun for a little while and throw away actually trying to be perfect. So in golf, it might be that in practice, if your fun level is down at a 2 or a 3, why not consider shaping shots, being creative with short game, thinking more about the target than internal factors like your body, your hand position, your elbows, your knees, your hips. This might well free you up and give you some confidence, some rhythm. The best people experiment, as Andy mentioned. So I'm telling you, or certainly asking you, try and learn from this episode. And as I mentioned on the previous episode, if you keep doing the same things, you will get the same results. So why not try this and then monitor it over, say, a week or a fortnight? Every time you train, every time you practice, mark yourself out of 10 for how much fun you've had. It may well bring back some of these childlike feelings of being fearless, not thinking. And that's what it's all about. It's all about enjoying yourself. And then you never know, you might be able to free yourself up and let the score just take care of itself. Or in Tiger's words, let the training take over. And if you are looking to have more fun on the golf course or in your sport, or you are frustrated with poor results, you'll benefit from signing up to my online accelerator course, which is set up to help you achieve your goals faster. And it's got a range of ideas in there that can support you, especially if you're going through challenging times. You're going to learn a lot about yourself, and it can only help you play and perform better, and of course, with a smile. So check out my website, sport-excellence.co.uk, under products and online accelerator course. If you enjoyed this episode of the Demystifying Mental Toughness podcast with David Charlton, do check out my website, sport-excellence.co.uk, and my online sport psychology resources. The Sport-Excellence website has essential resources for anyone looking to build their own mental toughness or the mental toughness of their athletes or teams, or if you want to achieve peak performance more often or optimal functioning. The Sport Excellence website has everything you need to keep moving forward and thrive. So go on, head over to sport-excellence.co.uk to find out more.